Tim, it is awesome to see you. How are you doing?
Great, good to see you too. It's, not to timestamp, but it's a Saturday morning and we are spending time on a weekend talking about fun stuff. And I couldn't be happier about that, to be honest.
Well, for this one, we will timestamp. And one of the reasons why we'll timestamp is because I'm working on implementing a process that starts creating content and then pushing it live within a 72-hour time period. This one we're recording on Saturday, the 14th, and I'm expecting to push it live on Monday, the 16th. We'll see how well we do. And then now we've got it on tape or in the recording space. I guess it's on a hard drive someplace where we can use that to hold myself accountable for it. Tim, why don't you share with everybody a little bit about what you do? Like, what's your focus from a business
Yeah,
perspective?
yeah, for sure. Thanks. So I own a business called Best Culture Solutions. I founded it about 4.5 years ago, and we specialize helping companies and job seekers find, the right fit for them. So we do that through the way of recruiting people for companies, or we also do that with helping individuals who might be facing some sort of a change in their career or a career transition. We help them through that and figure out what they want to do. Um, and we also help companies with people strategies just in general, or, how do you structure your organization? What types of roles do you need? Where do you need them? Stuff like that. And we're here basically to help people on both sides make sure that the people side of their businesses is right or is where it needs to be. Because frankly, it's the most important thing that you do. Every problem in every business is a people problem, right? At the end of the day, and every solution that you have in your business is people driven. It's not just on the problem side. The reality from an opportunity side is that every solution is driven by somebody in some way, shape, or form. And so, people strategy, frankly, is the most important thing that any leader has to do. And I think sometimes, or a lot of times, it's not viewed that way or it's not considered that way when it really is.
So what goes into people strategy?
Yeah, good question. So it's what are your strategic needs, right? What are your strategic needs as far as what your clients need or your customers need or your guests need, depending on what your business is. And are you aligned organizationally to supply that to people? Really, at the end of the day, and organizational alignment is all about having the right people in the right roles, positioned in the right places to serve that need or meet that strategic goal. And, then from there, or you understand what people you need and where you need them. Are you hiring them right? Are you training them right? And then are you treating them right throughout that? And that's really, in a nutshell, what it's all about. We could spend days talking about how you do that. But do you have a people that is right sized for what your clients need as far as your organizational structure is concerned? And then once you have that aligned, are you hiring the right people to be in the right positions? Are you training them right to succeed once they're there? And then are you treating them right by way of clarity so that way they can be empowered to just drive results?
Why do organizations struggle with this?
I think it's pretty simple. I think, like let's take, for instance, somebody who's in the business of HVAC, right? Air conditioning, heating. Somebody who gets in that business, they do it because they're passionate about the work. They love fixing things. They like solving problems for people in that realm. They like playing with the equipment. They like the subject matter, right? And so they get into business for that, or they lead to solve those types of problems. But then they forget that once you're a leader, or once there's other people in the organization, or you need more people in the organization, you need people to also solve those problems. But I guess to answer the question is that my common thread that I find with people is that they're so interested directly in the subject matter that they forget that a big part of delivering on that subject matter is making sure that people are lined up properly and equipped and empowered to deliver on that frontline product. That's what I usually see.
And you focus on the people side of things, and as someone who recruits and helps people with people strategy, I can see it. I'm going to push back though on
Sure.
people being the primary problem or the primary challenge or the thing where everything starts. And I get it. We have human beings who do human things inside organizations. A lot of times those humans are forced or pushed into a position where they're doing either things that they're not meant to do because it doesn't give them energy and they're not the skills that they have, or they're being forced to address process challenges inside the organization where people are where ultimately the organization has gotten to the point where it has grown too fast or scope creep has been created inside specific roles. So people get hired to do something, but then they're asked to do something else, or things start to change quickly and new fires come up. So when looking at it from a consulting perspective, I go the typical people, process, and either technology, tools, systems is a combination. So people, process, and tools, or people, process, and systems. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree. Like, and I think I like that you've pushed back on that, and I like that you've challenged it, because I would tell you that what you're talking about is an extension of all like that simple principle, right? I mean, you and I both know Lee Cockrell quite well, and that's something he often says: you hire people right, you train them right, you treat them right. I would tell you that elements of everything you've just mentioned would fall under those umbrellas in some way, shape, or form, right? Is there, when you're treating people right, part of that is making sure that you have processes to create clarity. A lot of times I think too, when that phrase comes out, people might just think that that means you should be nice to everybody. And really, no, it's about when you treat people right, it means that you've given them the tools, the clarity, the processes, the documentation, what have you, all those things, right, that unlock those results and create clarity for people. So I would agree with you. If that's misaligned, it's not going to work.
So, okay, so we talked a little bit about the kind of what you do, and both on the recruiting side, the helping connect the dots between people who have a set of skills and organizations who need to have those skills addressed inside organizations. So people who have skills, the ability to solve a problem, and organizations who have a problem and need someone to help them solve the problem. So let's get into how work is changing. What are some of the things that you are seeing change in the workplace when it comes to addressing people or people strategy?
Yeah, well, I mean, where do you start? Since the pandemic, that's changed a lot, right? And what's happening a lot is that the supply and demand side of labor is changing quite a bit. People have, and they have choices to where they work, they have choices to what they do, and it's created issues within the workplace, right?
Well,
There's a
we should
whole
say
bunch.
hello to someone. Who should we say hello to?
Okay,
Who do we
let's
have
say
joining
hello.
us?
So I am a dad of three little girls, and I've got my 3-year-old Tori here, and she just cannot stay away from this conversation.
What's good? What gets you excited about the comment? What are you doing today?
What are you doing today, Tori? I don't know. You don't know yet?
Me neither.
You gonna see your cousins later? Yeah. Okay. Cousins later. Yeah. This guy is Mike. Do you want to say hi to Mike? Hi, Mike.
Hello. How are you?
Is one of your favorite monsters named Mike on Monsters Inc? Yeah. Yeah. And Sully too. And Sully
You
too.
like
That's
Sully
right, Mike.
too? It's a good movie. Do you like that movie?
Yeah.
What do you like about the movie?
Yeah. You got a picture of your baby sister. That's right. Pet cat. Petting a cat. Now, Tori, can you go show that to Grandma? Okay. Okay, you go show Grandma that picture.
So so we've got these people challenges that happen inside
Yeah.
organizations, and we've got people strategy challenges, and we just started talking about some of the things that change. And I know a lot of people like to go back to COVID, and things change there. I'm tired of the things change with COVID. And the reason why I'm tired of the things change with COVID, and it's probably because I live in my own little bubble and I've worked remotely since 2003, is that all of a sudden things have to be done completely different than they were done before. And I think that's a lack of situational awareness, a lack of leadership, and a lack of perspective. People have worked in a remote environment for years. Now people are being asked to work in different remote environments. So you may be asked to do something a little bit differently. And there's some kind of evolution. There's also this pull back into the workplace. And I think part of that is a challenge in people being able to lead and manage people well. But anyway, enough about what I think. What's
Right.
changing
Yeah.
in the workplace?
So you are right about that, Mike. And I mean, the thing is that like, yeah, a lot of people will use the pandemic as a focusing event for a lot of things that were already happening anyway, right? Like, heightened awareness, sure, but these are not new concepts. These are not new ideas. These are not new things that are happening. These are things that, that have been happening to some degree for a long time. I mean, like you mentioned, people have been working remotely. They have been, door-to-door salesman. You mentioned that's a great example. I can remember even before the pandemic, if I was every now and then I would tell my boss, hey, I just need to buckle down and get some stuff done. I will work from home today, right? It's not a new concept by any stretch. People use it, right, as a catalyst, not to borrow your terms, for a lot of things. And maybe if anything, it was just a heightened awareness around that, or now everybody was forced to do something that they were already doing. And that's all there is to it. But what has happened is that I think that regardless of a pandemic or not, as time marches on, one thing that happens is that people start, on the supply side of labor, have been more and more exerting their own ability to choose, right? Their own ability to choose for themselves what it is that they want, and their own ability to choose for themselves what it is that they're going to do. And that has created a lot of shifts over the years, not just during the pandemic. And if I had to say, like you're right, it's not just it's not just this one event that did this. This has been a common stream, right? There's been many focusing events or workplace or labor trends, great resignations, quiet quitting, all that stuff. All that stuff is not really a trend. It's just another continuation of somebody exerting their right to choose, right? That is the common theme. People, as society progresses, as society gets more sophisticated, they want more right to choose for themselves, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that has never changed.
Okay. Hey, I'm an American. I'm very big on right to choose. So there's, and I'm talking to one of my favorite Canadians. I was going to say my favorite Canadian. Let's think about if there's other favorite
But
Canadians. Maybe we'll have to have a conversation about other Canadians that I know that and what the rank order is for Tim Dyck. So, Tim, you've got a podcast. What's the name of the podcast?
world at work.
So the World at Work podcast, and I've been on it as a guest, and you've had a number of great people on that podcast, including Carol Quinn, which is someone that we both appreciate. Let's talk a bit about some of the other changes that are happening in this world of work and this view around choice and how people are starting to brand or perceive different forms of consulting or project-based work, depending on how you look at it. There's this term that's out there, which is called fractional.
Yeah.
And fractions are not new. I remember learning about fractions back when I was in elementary school. And I remember looking at fractions when I'd see a pizza. You get a fraction of that pizza, and depending on how fast you ate your first piece of pizza, you could get another fraction of that pizza, especially in a family where you're the oldest of 7 and there's a lot of people around. So we're familiar with fractions. We see fractions even in things like Trivial Pursuit. There's fractions that you need to engage with, pieces of the pie that you need to win in order to move things forward. So fractions are not new. The term fractional from a work perspective is relatively new for a number of roles inside businesses. The first time I saw a fractional person in a business was when we had a fractional CFO when I was working at O'Reilly Media. That's the first time I saw a fractional. And that was back in, I'm going to say had to have been like 2010, 2011, 2012, that kind of time period. It might have been 2013, somewhere in there. And I've heard people talk about fractional COOs. So let's talk about fractional work. And first, let's get a simple definition. What's a fraction?
Well, a fraction is a part of a whole, right? And so we've seen different types of fractional work where, I'm pretty sure that your fractional CFO position, was for all intents and purposes a somewhat permanent role, but it just wasn't a full-time 8-hour day role. Is that what it was?
Actually, in that instance, it was an interim piece while we were going through the process of hiring the full-time person. And we still, Actually, now that you say it, I don't remember if I don't recall if we called that person an interim or a fractional, but I know that they worked fractionally with us, meaning they
Yeah.
might have been interim for us, working fractionally for multiple organizations.
Right. And that is one way it can take hold, right? And I've also seen in the CFO role, smaller businesses, like, I mean, I don't know how much CFOs get paid in the United States, but I know that in Canada, they generally start around the 175, 200, depending on the size and revenue of the company, right? A CFO is going to make anywhere from 175, 200, 250 to a lot, a lot more than that, frankly, depending on what the size of the company is. And so, yeah, I have seen, CFOs that are kind of permanent with a company, but because a smaller company doesn't need that level. It doesn't have that budget. It doesn't need that much support. It doesn't need a full-time person because it's a smaller business. They've hired a fractional CFO. And the purpose of that is because they still want, because a CFO isn't somebody who just makes sure your books are in order. They're somebody that helps you strategically plan with your money. They want that strategy. They want that strategic ability, that high level skill that is frankly hard to find. They don't need to pay somebody full time. So they bring somebody on, you know, permanently, but maybe for 5 hours a week, because that's the size they're, whatever it might be. But I've also seen your model where it's like, okay, we're between full-time CFOs. Let's get somebody here in the interim, not working full time, just to hold things through until we get there, because we don't need to lose the execution of any of our financial strategy or the planning therein, right? So I've seen both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in each of these things, there's a specific job to be done, and that job to be done can be handled by an expert, a person with a certain amount of expertise, and they might be able to do that job a bit faster. They might be able to do that job more effectively. They might help you avoid some of the pitfalls that happen when you bring in a more junior person to cover a certain role. And as Tim was talking about with this, all of the choice that's out there, it's sometimes hard to find the right person to bring into your organization at the right time. And what are you losing as a result of not being able to bring that right person in at the right time? How is it holding you back? How is it creating risk inside your organization? So we've got organizations who have a need, and that need is that a certain set of jobs are taken care of. And they may or may not have the expertise to know what those specific jobs are to be done. And many of them are still looking for people. Would you agree? Are there a lot of open roles out there? I mean, as much as different job reports are out there on jobs being up or jobs being down.
Find any number of people that say, I just can't find great people for this role, and that's just a common theme. I don't know. I'm seeing it everywhere. Every time you open up the news, no matter what the unemployment rate is, there's also, if the unemployment rate is high, there's still a conversing story that you can't find people. It's happening, right? It's like, oh, there's a lot of unemployment, but yet, so there should be a lot of people looking for work, but there's also a lot of companies that say they can't find it. So what is going on here, right? And there's also times when unemployment is low and you still can't find people. But either way, I guess what I'm trying to say, the common theme when I talk to business leaders these days is very, very, very much, I just can't find people for the role. I can't find good people for the role. And what I'm also seeing is that this provides an opportunity, right? You could go ahead and force somebody in the role that might not be able to bring that skill set, that knowledge, the heft to their internal processes or check however they operate. Or you might be better served by saying, you know what, I wanted somebody full time, but I might get better speed to impact if I bring somebody in on a fractional basis. The other advantage to that too is that a lot of times fractional people have a higher sense of urgency around it because they don't have the comfort of a regular salary, right? They're contractors, they're consultants. And so there's a different level of motivation there. And a lot of times those two things can come together to give you a faster speed to impact. You've got somebody who, yeah, they might be working for you a couple hours a day instead of 8 or whatever you say it's going to be. But the trade-off is that if you're bringing in somebody skilled and expertise and they know they've got limited amount of time to make an impact, their speed to impact can be a lot faster, right? Because they know that they have that sense of urgency coupled with that knowledge, that know-how to get stuff done. Does that make sense?
It,
And
it
it can be a greater.
Yeah, it does.
Gotcha.
And I mean, as you know, I mean, you've heard me say it, speed to impact is more important than going fast. And we go really, really fast trying to do a bunch of things, going from one thing to another, which also gets us into a situation where we're distracted and we're not focused on the main thing. We're not focused on addressing whatever the thing is that needs to be done inside the business. And then you run into this people strategy piece that Tim was talking about a little bit earlier, where you say, okay, we've got a lot of people who are working really, really hard on a lot of things, but we're not making the progress that we want to. And this is another area where an outside person can really help the organization because they don't have the same technical debt or organization debt that exists inside the company that typically comes up with statements like, well, it is what it is, or that's just how we do things, or whatever the thing is that they come up with, the fallback or the excuse on why they're not making the progress that they want to. So business owners, you have a challenge, you have a problem, you've got these gaps that are happening in your business and you're moving from one thing to a next, and you've got these open roles that are available. And you might be thinking you need someone to do this full time. What happens if you shift your mindset and you say, maybe I just need someone who's really, really good to come in for a fraction of their time to help me solve for this specific thing now, and then help solve for the next.
You're right. And you know what? And it's funny you say that because this works on both sides of that relationship, right? I was chatting with somebody who's a really good trainer, facilitator, you name it, right? Can set up your learning and development goals really well. They were interviewing for a role that was supposed to be a full-time kind of director level role, senior level role, right? To do all this. But they really didn't want to give up their own freedom, control, whatever you want to call it, by being a contractor. But they're really torn because they really want to help them. And they said, I probably can actually get more done for them on a part-time basis anyway, because of the mindset that comes with that and not getting comfortable. And they asked me for my advice. So like, do I go in there and say, look, I'll do it for you half time and I'll save you some money and get you better results? And it works because for them, they are going to make more per hour. For the company, they're going to pay less on the whole. And for the company, they're going to get greater results. For the potential employee, they maintain that control, right, over what they do. And it could be very much a win-win situation for both the supply side of labor and the demand side of labor. As times change, and we talked earlier about how the common thread isn't pandemics, great resignations, quiet quittings, the thread is greater control over the choices that we make in our work. That's the common thread. Those other things are just variables that we use to get that, right? This fractional is actually a beautiful solution for both sides. And it can be a beautiful solution for both sides. And the reality is that as time marches on, and I'm sure you've seen this, more and more and more people are freelancing instead of being tied to specific roles. And the reason for that is because people get greater control over how they can message their availability to people. Social media has been monumental for that. We can go directly to the source. We don't have to rely on traditional media to let people know who we are, or traditional methods. We can contact people directly like never before. And so that's just accelerated people's choice. Fractional can be a beautiful solution for both sides. The trick is just to make sure both sides are getting the right they're creating the right relationships from the supply side what they bring to the table, the demand side what they need. And it's a bit of a wild west right now. I'm sure you've noticed that, right? It's anybody can say they're a fractional, and we don't know if they are or not. And you have to do there needs to be probably some rigor around that. But the bottom line, and I'm going off on a tangent around that piece, fractional can be a beautiful solution for both the supply side and the demand side of labor, getting better results, getting higher speed to impact, yet for the supply side, maintaining that control. Frankly, on the whole, as they put all their different contracts together, probably doing better financially too, which is great, while maintaining that level of choice over where and how they work.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably have a couple of different conversations around this, which include risks on the client side, the demand side, risks on the supply side, the potential service provider, the person who the gig worker or the freelance worker or the consultant or the fractional. And those are all important terms. Unfortunately, kind of like the Princess Bride, there are a lot of people who use these terms and don't necessarily know what they mean, or have those terms mean something that is not necessarily what they think it means. And I know that's inconceivable, but there's a perspective that ends up happening. The whole idea here, though, that we're talking about is what happens if I solve for a problem inside my organization as a business leader by bringing in a specific resource. It could be a mercenary. So we've got a merc that comes in. That's happened in wars, right? A gig worker, a part-time worker, or whatever, a freelance worker to come in and solve for a specific thing. Now, on the flip side, that Tim has kind of taken us toward is that demand piece. So you're a person who's out there and you want the freedom of choice. You want the flexibility. You want to be able to work on really interesting things inside organizations, and you've got capacity and capability to be able to do those things. So let's talk about it. How do I know as an individual if doing gig work or freelance work or contract work or fractional work, like we're talking about, might make sense for me?
Well, you and I are both entrepreneurs, so we can speak to this mindset and there are positives and there are drawbacks, right? To taking a more entrepreneurial route or or in this case specifically fractional, right? There's some positive things and there's some drawbacks to it. And we're about to say hello to the other one now.
Look at this. We've got another arrival in the conversation.
Want to say hi to Mr. Mike? So please say hi to Mr. Mike.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
For my other kid, Busbina.
Oh, your doll?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not my doll. I brought her to the store and now I can't find her.
Okay, I think she's in Grandma's bed.
Well,
yeah, well, then she's somewhere where you left her. Go take a look. Grandma can help you find her too. So I've got 3 little girls. That is the oldest. That's Nevaeh. And you all met Tori earlier. But okay. So let's talk about pros and cons about going fractional. A pro, you can work and your kids are still near you. And that can be a lot of fun, as we have just found out. So if you've got kids and you like being around more to do that, that's good. The trade-off is sometimes you have to work later hours. But I don't know what you found, Mike. I mean, you've been on the entrepreneurial path for a lot longer than me, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these things. I would tell you there's a lot of pros around. You can stay truer to your values. You can, right? You frankly, let's be honest, you can be better off financially, right? You can be.
Yeah.
You can specifically work on things that energize you, and then if you're finding that it doesn't energize you, it's easier. It's easier to say, you know what, maybe it's time to move on to different opportunities. Whereas if you're in a full-time job, right, if you're in a fractional situation and maybe there's a situation that or a contract or what have you that isn't quite working out anymore and you walk away from it, then you're not saying goodbye to your entire income anymore, right? Whereas when you're in a full-time job and you need to make that change, it's harder because now you have to replace 100%. And that gets trickier. There's a lot of advantages to it. Greater control. You don't have to ask people for vacation time. You can work from anywhere, you name it. But there are trade-offs. Sometimes they can be a roller coaster, right? Financially as well. On the whole, you'll be better off, but there's ups and downs that can create different types of stress. You get 3 a.m. sleepless nights, and sometimes those are where your best ideas come because you feel like your back's against the wall and you got to do something about it. Sometimes you do have to work more hours, right? Sometimes the reality is that, yeah, you're around your kids while you're working, but sometimes you're working and you want to see your kids more in a dedicated way or with dedicated time. And you have to do things like this on a Saturday, which I enjoy talking to you. But it's a trade-off, right? And there are trade-offs. What do you find?
Well, I think the one of the challenges is why do it? Like, why do you want to do it? What are you looking for? What's important to you? And then from there, and you can go through the problem solving framework that I shared in the past on the podcast and kind of work through it. What's the specific problem we're trying to solve? And what we're doing as an individual, we go to why first, which is why does that problem persist? Why is it important to solve? What's the impact of solving versus not solving? And then get into the who, around who has it, who's impacted, and who cares. And that on the personal side, a lot of times the who is you plus the people that are around you. When you move into this fractional world, though, the who is impacted by it are your clients. And you need to remember that you have a commitment to them, not only to your family and to your business and to all of those things. You have a commitment to others relative to helping them operate your business. So do not manufacture fit. And one of the challenges, especially with all of the noise around fractional right now, and people struggling with generating demand associated with that fractional work, is that people allow scope creep to happen. So you go into it first with this idea of, this is the type of work I do really, really well. I'm a builder. I'm a builder who also knows how to operate. I'm a builder who likes building things, but does not like operating the machinery when there's not a problem that's happening, when we're kind of getting ourselves into this situation of just maintaining the machine. That's not super exciting to me. I don't like having the same conversations over and over and over again and not seeing progress. Sometimes that progress doesn't happen because of lack of change management, lack of culture fit, lack of whatever. There's a number of things that are out there. But if you're thinking about fractional, or you're thinking about doing gig work or freelance work or testing this kind of work, the first thing I would do is get really, really clear around, what do you do? What specific problems do you solve for? Why is it important for you to solve those problems? How do you feel about it? Can you actually do it? Not that you enjoy doing the work and aren't an expert, but like, are you an expert in this area? And then it turns into, who do you serve? Like, who is it that you want to attract into your business so that you can serve them appropriately? If you can't answer those questions, I don't think you've earned the right to go into fractional work in a full-time fractional capacity. You build out your business. So you might be fractional for convenience because you want to test, rather than fractional by design, which is what happens when you build out a proper fractional practice. Those are some of my views on it. I think people get into it because it sounds really cool and it sounds really sexy, and then they get in and they realize how hard it is. And some of the hard kind of things that happen are they allow scope creep to happen because they want to do good for their customers. So they allow things to happen that are outside of the statement of work. And that is a recipe for disaster. They get into situations where they spend so much time fulfilling client needs that they don't do the demand side of things. So they have really lumpy aspects inside their business. And when they have those lumpy aspects inside their business, and their kids need to eat, and they need to keep the roof up over the house and all that other kind of stuff, they allow scope creep to happen. And all of a sudden, not only are they a revenue expert, but they're also a something to see out there. And the reason it's disgusting to see out there is because it's super easy to go out to ChatGPT and get a checklist on how to build a marketing plan inside an organization, or how to work on people strategy. And now you think you're an expert because you've read it. You might know a little bit more than somebody else, but you do not know how to fix it when it breaks, and it will break. And it breaks over and over and over again. And there will be a new gate that you need to unlock. And if you're not into that mode, I don't believe that you've earned the right to do this type of work as a professional. Yeah, you can do it as an amateur, but then do it pro bono. Do it in an environment where you get to test and help some companies who need that kind of help. Anyhow, you got me on a soapbox.
By the way, you're so right. So there's so many things I could talk about on this. So first of all, so let me tell you why I got into it. Now, don't get me wrong. I did not start my business solely thinking that this is a fractional business. It's something that we offer as one of our products. We offer fractional HR services in different ways, and sometimes even just project-based work is fractional because you're trying to get speed to impact, right? But I did this. Like, sure, I've talked about a lot of pros and cons, but I didn't talk about them because that's why I got into this. I got into this because I knew that I could help people, right? And I wanted to help people, and I wanted to make a greater impact for people when it came to people strategies and recruiting and HR strategies. Because I had. It's ironically, I was never actually in my professional life a dedicated HR professional. I was actually an operational person. But the reason why we had such operational success is because I focused on hiring people the right way, training people the right way, and treating people the right way. And I knew that I could help people with that based on the success that we had there. And that was my motivator. I wasn't able to I was not able to have the impact that I thought I could have where I was. And I wanted to have a greater impact for people. All those things I talked about are all the things I didn't think about when I went into it. It's like, this could happen, that could happen. I knew financially would be fine. I knew, like, I talked a lot about financials, and that's because that's something that I worry about. Not because I'm driven by money, it's because I'm driven by making sure I can do what I want to do. Right. And that's what stresses me out personally. All those pros and cons I talked about were things that I just wanted to help people. This is all the stuff that came with it, right? That's all the crap that came with it that I didn't think about. But one of the things that you're right about is that and this is a big challenge in fractional, and it was a big challenge that we faced for a long time. And I still think that we face, with the coaching field. Everybody's a coach now, right? How do you know that they're a good coach or not? And to your point, anybody now can go on ChatGPT and pretend that they're an expert. And I don't know about you, but if somebody uses ChatGPT on me, I can spot it like that.
How do you spot it? What are some of the things that you see?
Well, first of all, there'll always be some sort of written communication, and that will be generated by ChatGPT. And I don't know about you, Mike, but I can look at a block of words now and be like, this is too polished without any specific substance.
Okay.
Right. You've got a lot of superlatives in these words and these emails, right? And this just happened. I'm organizing some stuff locally. I won't get into it because I don't want to incriminate anybody. But basically, somebody had wanted to work with us on this, and they had sent me an email. And we do this, this, and this. And as soon as I read it, I was like, you just put this in ChatGPT and told to spit you something out.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I copied and pasted and put it in an AI checker, 100% generated by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
100%. I knew it because why? It was full of big words, no specific how or what or metrics or measurables, right? It's like when I read somebody's resume, if you just tell me I did this, this, and this, that doesn't mean as much as I did this many times with this many people, because it's more specific and it tells that you actually did it because you put the effort in to share with me the specific details that you have or the specific knowledge you have.
Yep.
I can see it a mile away now. And sure enough, when I met with that person, it was at no point could they offer me specific, tangible how, right? ChatGPT is really good at giving you a high level, really great sounding what, but how are you going to do it? And you can tell if somebody, when you're talking to them, if they actually have an idea of how to operate. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to have a million years of experience, but have they fleshed out their process? I could talk to somebody new and I can tell if they put the thought into it or not, or if they're just giving me crap.
Yeah.
And this person was giving me piles of crap.
Yeah.
And I could tell. And so
this is one of the challenges that are out there. And I know we're getting close on time here, and we'll continue the conversation and share some of the things that Tim and I are working on together in this context. But there's a buyer beware out there. There are a number of ways that you can present yourself as being an expert based on the words that are shared, and it looks good on the surface, but when things break, and they will, when problems happen, and they will, do they know how to pick things up and move things forward? Do they know how to problem solve? Do they know how to make decisions? Do they know how to lead? Do they know how to work through it? Do they have that area of expertise? And I think it works on both sides. Actually, not I think. I know it works on both sides. It works on the side of the business owner who's making a decision to bring in an expert to take care of some of these things, and going through the evaluation of saying, hey, what more can I get by having someone in here part-time working on it? Totally. And I am not a fan of hourly type stuff. And I know a lot of people like hourly stuff, but with the way my brain works, hourly doesn't work. It doesn't shut off. So it's not, and I'm not going to clock in and clock out every time I'm thinking about an organization. Some people are a little bit different. They can do that. In different roles, they can do that. On the flip side, on the people side, if you're one of those people whose brain doesn't shut off, the hourly stuff may not work for you. And an hour of me is different than an hour of somebody else when it comes to certain things that I'm an expert in, which may or may not be the right fit inside an organization. What I hope you get out of this conversation is there's a way to think different so that you can do different when it comes to gig work, fractional work, freelance work, contract work, part-time work, whatever you want to call it. And although there's a lot of marketing around it today, the function of the role hasn't really changed significantly. And the reason I believe that is because there's always problems that need to be solved inside organizations. And sometimes people go in and hire a McKinsey or a Deloitte or an Accenture or a BCG or some of these really large companies to come in and do it. And by having the demand, the supply that's out there, you can actually make that happen in a much smaller organization and not have that same type of expense, which when it comes to those guys, they typically have someone who comes in and pulls the package together and communicates it, but there's a bunch of other people working in the background. When you work with someone like me or you work with someone like Tim, you're typically working with us directly, which has that, we have the operator expertise. So Tim, thanks for the conversation. Anything you'd like to close on or kind of put a bow on based on what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, let's put a bow on it. Yeah, for sure. Like, so fractional can be great for both sides. Fractional can actually drive greater value for both sides, get more stuff done for both sides of the relationship when it's done right and when it's done well. And so the big trick is just making sure you're getting, we talked about a scope creep. It happens on both sides, right? Is the organization getting the right person from a scope perspective? Is there opportunity for creep to set in? Is a professional focus on what they do? Or is there opportunity for scope creep to come in?
So Tim, thank you. Where can people find the World at Work podcast and connect up with you directly?
Yeah, for sure. Great. Thanks for asking. So my website is bestculturesolutions.ca. Email address is tim@bestculturesolutions.ca.
Awesome. We'll include links in the show notes. What I've realized is I'm not very good at including links in the show notes. So I have to train the GPT that helps me with show notes, do this a little bit better. So we'll see if we can make that adjustment between now and Monday. I do use ChatGPT to create all of the show notes for the podcast. And if anybody's interested in learning a little bit more, let me know that. And I'm happy to share how we're doing it. Basically, we take the transcript, put it into a custom GPT, and then have it push the output. And we don't hide it. If you know somebody who would enjoy this podcast, please share it with them. If you know somebody who's either struggling with hiring inside their business or is struggling with the flexibility of figuring out what do I do next, they might find value in this because there are some amazing experts out there who are doing amazing things and could have amazing impact on organizations. And do the things like Tim was talking about, help people do the things they want to do better and faster in the context of their organizations, in the context of their small business. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?